to beach the battleship Yamato and engage as a stationary fortress until it was destroyed. The USS Bunker Hill, the USS Enterprise, the USS Essex. What none of them truly understood was that this lone, desperate mission would unleash the most catastrophic carrier airstrike on a surface warship in naval history. Yamato. Her sister ship, Musashi, had been sunk 6 months prior in the Sibuyan Sea. The Shinana, transformed into an aircraft carrier, survived just 10 days after being commissioned before American submarines sank her. The USS Bunker Hill cut through the Pacific waves at 25 knots, with her Essex-class hull displacing 27,100 tons of water. Vice Admiral Marc Mitscher stood on the flag bridge, reviewing intelligence reports. His Task Force 58 commanded 386 aircraft across 11 fleet carriers and 6 light carriers. Mitchell, directing operations from Bunker Hill, led a team focused on extending American air power over great ocean distances. F-6F Hellcats provided fighter cover, SB-2C Helldivers were used for dive bombing, and TBF Avengers carried the historic weapon, the Mark 13 aerial torpedo, in their bomb bays. The Mark 13 embodied 3 years of combat experience, showcasing refined American engineering. In contrast to the earlier war models that frequently malfunctioned and failed to explode, the upgraded Mark 13 could be released at speeds of 260 knots from an altitude of 800 feet. Each torpedo was equipped with 600 pounds of Torpex explosive. American pilots had discovered that focusing their attacks on one side of enemy vessels could cause severe listing, making it difficult for them to counterflood. Commander James D. Ramage, the air group commander on the Enterprise, had analyzed Japanese shipbuilding so thoroughly that he could draw the armor layout of Yamato from memory. Born in Waterloo, Iowa, and holding a degree in aeronautical engineering, Ramage recognized that sinking Yamato demanded meticulous coordination. Several torpedo strikes beneath the armor belt and bomb hits to disable anti-aircraft defenses were essential. The line between a successful mission and disastrous losses hinged on timing and the sheer concentration of force. Aboard the Japanese battleship Yamato, Captain Kosaku Aruga went over the mission orders for the 10th time. On April 6, Yamato was set to load 3,400 tons of fuel oil at Tokoyama Depot. In a quiet act of defiance against orders to provide only enough fuel for a one-way trip, the depot staff decided to give the task force 60% of their fuel capacity instead of the authorized 40%. While this amount could theoretically support a round trip at economical speed, combat maneuvers would deplete it long before any return. Aruga had led destroyers at Midway and had witnessed the carriers being devastated by American dive bombers. A coordinated air assault from multiple directions at once. The American carriers organized into 3 task groups as they headed toward the intercept point. Task Group 58.1 moved to the north, Task Group 58.3 positioned itself to the east, and Task Group 58.4 was hurrying to join after refueling. Each carrier deployed search aircraft in expanding box formations. The radar operators were on 4-hour shifts, their screens illuminated by false signals from waves and rain squalls. Aircraft Coordinator Lieutenant Commander Joseph Taylor had been directing fighters across the Pacific for 20 months. His hands instinctively navigated the radio controls while he directed the intricate aerial choreography. Launch cycles every 90 minutes, combat air patrols at 3 different altitudes, strike groups assembling at set coordinates. The weather was worsening, with the cloud base at 3,000 feet, rain squalls passing through the region, and visibility fluctuating between 2 and 10 miles. On April 6, 1945, at 1,520 hours, the Yamato Task Force left Tokoyama Harbor. 10 ships, led by the light cruiser Yohagi and followed by destroyers, with Yamato at the back. The Emperor had personally requested this, but what was the Navy's role? How were they contributing to the defense of Okinawa? This mission was the Navy's response, a show of loyalty that everyone recognized as pointless. Vice Admiral Seiichi Ito, commanding the Second Fleet from the bridge of Yamato, had originally turned down the order. He only agreed to take action when he learned that the Emperor was expecting it. While the task force navigated through Bungo Strait, the tight channel between Kyushu and Shikoku, 2 American submarines were on standby. USS Threadfin, under the command of Commander John Joseph Foote, detected the Japanese force on radar around 1745. 10 contacts in formation, moving at 22 knots, heading 240 degrees. Foote briefly surfaced to send his contact report in plain language, aware that the Japanese would pick it up, but valuing speed over security. USS Huckleback, located further south, assumed surveillance as the Japanese fleet entered the East China Sea. Commander Frederick Edward Janney monitored their movements throughout the night, sending for comprehensive position reports despite heavy screening by Japanese destroyers. As dawn broke on April 7, conditions deteriorated. Cloud cover descended to 1,500 feet, and visibility dropped to 5 miles amid rain squalls. 60 fighters from Kyushu arrived at 0600 to deliver the promised air cover, staying for exactly 4 hours of limited protection until 10100. The fighters circled at 15,000 feet above the clouds, rendering them ineffective against low-altitude torpedo strikes. Admiral Spruance, in charge of the Fifth Fleet, had instructed his battleships to get ready for surface combat. 6 advanced battleships armed with radar-guided 16-inch guns faced off against a single Japanese battleship that was already running low on fuel. However, Vice Admiral Mitchell had different ideas. At 0800, without waiting for Spruance's consent, he commanded his carriers to initiate airstrikes. At 0657 on April 7, the destroyer Asashimo reported engine issues and started to lag behind. Captain Heizo Kataki, in charge of Destroyer Division 21 on the Asashimo, commanded emergency repairs, but the damage was too severe for him to address while at sea. The destroyer continued to fall further behind as the task force made its way to Okinawa. Task Groups 58.1 and 58.3 commenced launching at 10100. The strike package was enormous, consisting of 132 fighters, 50 dive bombers, and 98 torpedo planes. Planes from 11 different carriers were all heading toward one target. The fighters would lead the way to silence the anti-aircraft defenses. Dive bombers would strike from various angles to disrupt the defensive fire. Torpedo bombers would sink their attacks to target the same side of the objective. PBM Mariner flying boats stayed in touch, flying in circles just beyond gun range, providing constant position updates via radio. At 12:20, Yamato's lookouts detected the first wave of American planes. Dark shapes appeared from the clouds, getting bigger and increasing in number. The anti-aircraft guns were raised, tracking the targets and poised for the command to fire. At 12:32, Yamato unleashed her main battery. The 18.1-inch guns fired Sanshiki anti-aircraft shells, 3,200-pound projectiles that burst in the air, dispersing thousands of fiery fragments. The shells exploded at predetermined distances, which pilots easily dodged by changing altitude. The enormous guns were limited to firing just once a minute in their anti-aircraft capacity, while American planes were launching attacks every few seconds. The initial coordinated assault began at 12:35. Aircraft from the USS Bennington and USS Hornet divided into several groups. Through the rain and spray, the Yamato appeared astonishingly massive, stretching 863 feet long with her pagoda superstructure towering 150 feet above the water. Anti-aircraft fire blasted from every gun mount, creating a deadly web of steel and flames. At 12:37, the first torpedo struck Yamato's port side close to the rear secondary battery. The blast propelled a column of water 100 feet into the air. 2 minutes later, a second torpedo hit the port side amidships. Shortly after, a 1,000-pound bomb pierced the deck near the rear 6.1-inch turret, igniting fires that would rage until the ship went down. Damage control teams hurried to flood compartments on the starboard side to counter the growing list, but the hits continued to arrive faster than they could react. At 12:30, the destroyer Asashimo, still grappling with engine issues, was targeted by aircraft from the USS San Jacinto. Unable to maneuver properly, she sustained several bomb and torpedo strikes. She ultimately sank with all hands on board, including 326 crew members and Captain Kataki, with no survivors found. At 12:43, the destroyer Hamikaze took a direct hit from a bomb on her bridge, resulting in the deaths of her captain and most of the bridge crew. Burning and out of control, she was eventually destroyed by torpedo bombers. 242 men lost their lives alongside her. The light cruiser Yahagi was simultaneously targeted by planes from 3 separate carriers. Numerous bomb and torpedo strikes rendered her immobile, engulfed in flames. By 1300, Yamato had sustained at least 5 torpedo hits on her port side. Her list had worsened to 15 degrees despite efforts to counter-flood. Her speed had decreased to 18 knots. The second wave was already assembling. 100 planes from task groups 58.1 and 58.3. New pilots with full ammo taking aim at a battered giant that was struggling to move. The torpedo bombers executed their strikes with expert coordination. 3 divisions approached from varying angles, all focused on the port side. At 13:42, 3 additional torpedoes struck the port side. The Yamato's list rose to 20 degrees. Water poured in through breached hatches, flooding compartments that should have remained dry. The assistant damage control officer informed Captain Aruga that counter-flooding was no longer an option, as all void spaces on the starboard side were already compromised. Vice Admiral Ito understood the situation was unavoidable. At 13:50, he commanded the cancellation of Operation Tango. Signal flags were raised to instruct the remaining destroyers to assist in rescuing survivors. However, Yamato's radio rooms had been destroyed, so communication with the rest of the fleet could only be conducted through visual signals amidst the smoke and spray. At 14:02, Captain Aruga ordered the crew to abandon ship. However, the vessel was already listing nearly 30 degrees, making it almost impossible to move on deck. Some men slid down the slanted surface into the water, while others were trapped below deck as hatches jammed or flooded passages ensued. The portrait of the Emperor was taken from the bridge and given to a junior officer with instructions to survive. Executive Officer Captain Jiro Nomura urged Aruga to leave the bridge. The captain declined, instructing Nomura to escape. Aruga secured himself to the compass binnacle with rope, resolved to go down with the ship. Vice Admiral Ito withdrew to his cabin, turning down all pleas to evacuate. At 14:07, another torpedo struck the starboard side, marking the only hit there throughout the battle. The impact went largely unnoticed as Yamato had already listed over 35 degrees. Crew members were leaping from the high side, plummeting 60 feet or more into the water. 17. The forward magazine exploded, and the blast was visible 160 kilometers away in Kyushu. A mushroom cloud soared 20,000 feet into the sky, breaking through the clouds. The shockwave sent American aircraft spiraling out of control and caused minor damage to those flying nearby. When the smoke finally settled, the Yamato had vanished. All that remained were debris and oil, indicating where the world's largest battleship had just been. Out of Yamato's crew of 3,332 men, only 276 made it out alive. Vice Admiral Ito, Captain Aruga, and most of the senior officers perished with the ship. The destroyer Yukikars and Futsuki managed to rescue survivors, even amid ongoing air assaults, as their crews tossed anything that could float overboard for those in the water. The heavily damaged destroyer Kasumi, with her bow blown off, was sunk by torpedoes from Futsuki. Isokase, ablaze and unable to move, was also scuttled. The light cruiser Yohagi sank at 14:05 after putting up a brave fight against insurmountable odds. The final count was tragic. 6 out of 10 ships were lost, with around 4,137 Japanese sailors killed. On the American side, there were 10 aircraft and 12 crew members lost. Carrier aviation accomplished in just 2 hours what would have taken battleships a full day to achieve, if they could have done it at all. The success of Task Force 58 marked a significant advancement in carrier warfare doctrine. The coordinated strikes from several carriers, the focused attacks to break through defenses, and the tactical accuracy of hitting one side of the ship all showcased American naval aviation at its peak. 3.5 years after Pearl Harbor, the predictions of air power supporters had come true in the most striking way imaginable. The psychological effect on the Imperial Navy was devastating. Yamato was more than just a vessel, she embodied Japan itself. The name Yamato was an ancient poetic reference to Japan. Her loss signified not only a military defeat but also a spiritual downfall. Admiral Toyota would later state that the failure of Operation Tango signaled the practical end of the Imperial Navy as a combat force. Intelligence capabilities had consistently offered a significant advantage. American codebreakers intercepted Japanese naval communications, learning about missions before many Japanese ship captains even received their orders. Submarines were strategically placed, search patterns refined, and the element of surprise was entirely lost. Training standards highlighted the industrial disparity between the two countries. By 1945, American pilots arriving in the Pacific had an average of 300 hours of flight training, compared to just 100 hours for their Japanese counterparts. American squadrons returned home after their combat tours to train new replacements, while Japanese squadrons stayed in action until they were wiped out. The battle had a significant impact on naval construction around the world after the war. Every major navy analyzed the engagement, acknowledging that battleships had become outdated, anti-aircraft defenses required major upgrades, and that radar and communication systems were just as crucial as guns and armor. Admiral Mitscher's after-action report highlighted that coordination was essential for success. 11 carriers executing strikes needed perfect timing to avoid interfering with one another. The insights gained would be utilized in Korea 5 years afterward. Personal accounts highlighted the tragedy. Ensign Mitsuru Yoshida, one of the few surviving bridge officers from Yamato, would later recount how he witnessed American pilots carry out attacks despite intense anti-aircraft fire. Their bravery matched that of any samurai. Captain Tamechi Hara of the destroyer Yohagi survived its sinking and would later articulate the battle's futility with great eloquence. The strategic consequences reached further than just the immediate tactical win. The failure of Operation Tango meant that the defenders in Okinawa would not get any naval assistance. American casualties at Okinawa, exceeding 50,000, could have been even greater if Yamato had managed to reach the invasion beaches. The plan for invading Japan was shaped by the sinking of the Yamato. If the Japanese were ready to send their final battleship on a suicide mission, how far would they go to protect their homeland? The atomic bomb dropped 4 months later was partly justified by the belief that Japan would endure massive losses. The remains of the Yamato were found in 1985, split into two main parts at a depth of 340 meters. The bow section came to rest upright, with the chrysanthemum crest still apparent. The stern section, however, was wrecked by the magazine explosion. Recent studies indicate that Yamato sustained between 11 and 13 torpedo hits and 6 to 8 bomb strikes. The most significant damage resulted from the ongoing flooding due to several torpedo hits on the port side. Reunions of veterans brought together former foes. In 1985, survivors from Yamato met with the American pilots who had targeted her. Japanese survivors recognized that the mission was doomed from the start. American pilots admired the bravery of those who set out knowing they would not come back. The memorial in Kurii, Japan, the birthplace of the Yamato, attracts thousands of visitors each year. Japanese people visit to pay tribute to the crew's sacrifice, while Americans come to gain insight into their former adversary. The museum highlights the importance of peace by reflecting on the heavy toll of war. Cultural representations have influenced how we remember events. The 2005 Japanese film Yamato depicted the crew's sacrifice as both heroic and in vain. There is truth in both Japanese and American viewpoints. The battle was a tragedy for the men who lost their lives and also a sign of military progress. The environmental consequences are still felt today, with around 1,000 tons of fuel oil trapped in Yamato's wreck, gradually seeping into the ocean. The wreck is regarded as a war grave, safeguarded from salvage under international agreements. Educational programs across the globe utilize the battle to highlight the significance of air superiority, the risks of relying on outdated strategies, and the human toll of not accepting defeat. Military academies examine Operation Tango as a case study of how institutional pride can overshadow tactical decision-making. Technical assessments showcase the complexity of American tactics. Torpedo bombers came in at precise angles to increase their chances of hitting targets. Dive bombers focused on taking out communication and fire control systems. Fighters systematically suppressed anti-aircraft positions in coordinated waves. The assault was not chaotic but a meticulously planned operation. Weather was a key factor. Low clouds hindered high-altitude bombing, pushing aircraft into anti-aircraft fire. Rain squalls offered cover for the torpedo bombers. Choppy waters complicated damage control efforts. Communication issues worsened the challenges faced by the Japanese. Yamato's radio antennas were taken out early on, hindering coordination. Flag signals were hidden by smoke. The communication breakdown sped up the disintegration of organized resistance. leadership approaches mirrored the cultures of their respective services. Mitscher took an aggressive stance, initiating strikes without clear authorization. Everything unfolded according to orders, even with personal doubts. Aruga carried out his responsibilities without hesitation. Every choice influenced the outcome of the battle. In the depths of the East China Sea, the Yamato lies in ruins, her enormous guns silent, her crew entombed within her wreckage. The battle is over, but its lessons remain. Technology defined capability. Bravery could not bridge the gap of material disadvantage. Hubris led to ruin. The sinking of the battleship Yamato signified not only the end of the battleship era but also the start of a deeper understanding of war's true nature. Operation Tango may have failed in its tactical goals, yet it succeeded in highlighting the futility of waging wars with outdated ideas. This lesson, etched in the fates of 4,137 Japanese sailors and 12 Americans, serves as Yamato's final contribution to humanity, a cautionary tale about the costs of war that resonates through the years to our present day.